But there's something really different about the AI space where it's doing all of that, like every new technology of, oh my gosh, it's going to create horrifying new problems for all of us. But at the same time, it's solving a ton of security problems. We haven't had a cyber Pearl Harbor yet. I keep it keeps feeling like
cyber Pearl Harbor. It's got a nice ring to it. Hey everybody, welcome to the TPRM Podcast. I'm so excited to have on our guest this week. He's my good friend, Alex Rice. He is the CTO, the CISO, and the co-founder of the bug bounty platform, HackerOne. We're going to be talking a lot about AI and bounty programs. In particular, we'll be talking about the implications that AI has for bounty programs going forward, and we'll touch on how having AI-backed attackers changes what's expected of defenders. So things like faster patching, limiting your blast radius, and getting those remediation plans dialed in. So let's get started. All right, thanks for joining. This is Threats, Pitfalls, and Risk Myths. And today we have joining us Alex Rice, the co-founder and CTO, and I believe CISO, probably some other things, over at HackerOne, the preeminent bug bounty program. I think you guys were like first out with that as well. When it comes to helping people understand vulnerabilities in their platform. And it's like always the first thing I end up talking about when I'm helping companies get their security programs rolling when it comes to SaaS and keeping things secure. So welcome. Thanks for joining.
Let's do it, Nate. Glad to be here.
That is the level of excitement I hope to hear from all guests. Well, let's start with AI because clearly that's the important topic when it comes to vulnerabilities these days. There's been a lot of the automation of weaponization. We saw things recently where it's like $1 a piece, being able to look at CVEs as they came out, build POCs for them, test against it, make sure it works, and then just build this giant database of exploits that were working. You know, how do you see that when it comes to your customers and just bug bounty programs in general? Because it seems like that has the potential to break some of the economics of having a bounty program.
I feel like I'm a little bit of a traitor to the security space on this, because usually when some new technology is coming out, the security risks of it are all that we get to focus on. And we spend a ton of time just getting up to speed on, all right, what are all the things that go wrong? How do we do this? But there's something really different about the AI space where it's doing all of that, like every new technology of, oh my gosh, it's going to create horrifying new problems for all of us. But at the same time, it's solving a ton of security problems. So I feel like I'm in this weird world as a CISO where a big chunk of my job is like, let's be really thoughtful about what are the threats from AI. But I continually drawn towards what are all the ways it's going to just help all of the stuff we're already dealing with and already just behind on. So I feel like on the balance of things, it's fun to just change hats every once in a while and be a little bit deliberate around like, all right, what do we think AI is going to do to solve all of the stuff we failed to solve already over the last 30 years? And where are the areas it's going to get a little bit more challenging?
Yeah, and I used to land on the side of like, oh, defenders will have all the advantages because we have all the context. We can see all of our systems. We know how they're configured and, have access to everything if we need to knock stuff out. And then I've now come to change my thought on that a bit, thinking that it's actually a lot of work to figure out how to get all that context, pull the useful stuff, and not blow out a context window to have AI help. So that there's tons of stuff it certainly can help with, I think. And I assume most teams at this point are probably doing a significant amount more than they were just thanks to AI. But yeah, the whole automation of weaponization and just having agents enable kind of people who you would have made fun of as script kiddies before, and now suddenly they like have expertise far beyond what they actually have and the ability to multiply themselves. That sort of scares me.
Yeah, it's an interesting point of like who gets the bigger advantage and who gets more advantage. Because it's clear there's going to be advantages on both sides.
Yep.
I think it's less about capabilities in my view. Certainly this is getting more capabilities to different categories of actors. But the thing that worries me the most is, of all the asymmetry we have between attackers and defenders, speed disproportionately benefits attackers.
Yep.
And speed is the overarching trait of current AI approaches. There's a lot of emphasis you have going into how do you get the accuracy up? How do you get hallucination up? How do you get more capabilities into it? But nobody's debating that AI is faster than humans at most things.
Yep.
So as the accuracy and the capabilities get better, the speed advantage is already there. So you named one example there of like, let's take an existing thing that happens. And like every time there's whether you're in the old world of Microsoft's Patch Tuesday or in the current world of how many NPM patches do I have to apply today? New software has been updated. We've got to update it. It was always a race. Like speed was always the question. And so now if you think of it, the capability around is it possible for a bad actor to reverse engineer a patch and get an exploitable weapon? It's not that that's new. Like that's there. It's that it's a lot faster than it was before. And I think the only thing that we do about that is not sit around kind of being sad about AI changing the nature of things.
Don't think that's going to be super helpful.
But it's how do we get our own organization moving faster? And it's a different mode of operating in where you don't usually have security leaders just advocating purely for speed. You should have to be a bit more nuanced about these things. And I think that's the new disadvantage that we're at, is that we clearly have to bias towards speed, but we also have to care about a whole suite of concerns that attackers aren't burdened with.
Probably not a lot of change control going on the attacker side to make sure that those pull requests are all being reviewed. Yeah, I think how do you see that affects, though, like people that have bounty programs and things like that? Because if you now have people that are just hammering you every second, and if you don't patch something for a day, suddenly they can just have automated bots sort of finding this. Maybe that's not happening now, but I imagine at some point in the next couple of years that becomes very feasible to just watch those CVEs come out and just build something and start scanning right away and see what it hits. I mean, how do you think about that when it comes to, again, like the economics of what makes bounty programs work when the economics change on the attacker side for how they can kind of feasibly go after targets?
Yeah, so bounty programs have always been about paying for value.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a different stance. They're not one size creates all. It really depends on what organization you're taking. Most people who are launching bounty programs are already out the gate not incentivizing disclosures of known vulnerabilities. They're not putting out there, hey,
it's something exploitable.
It's not about finding a vulnerability. It's about show me some gaps in my vulnerability management program. Mm-hmm. So the typical bounty program doesn't do that, but the best ones do that. They say, hey, we're pretty sure that our vulnerability management program is patching all criticals within 14 days in these assets. So if you find something that's exploitable that hasn't been patched in 14 days, we want to know about that. And so we're already starting to see that dynamic change for the most mature organizations. It's like, hey, our current stance is this is what we think our security posture is. If you're able to demonstrate some avenue of vulnerability that we didn't think of in this, we want to learn about that and we want to incentivize that. And so I think you're going to see that dynamic change and those windows get brought in further, but it's not going to be evenly distributed, and it's going to be more heavily concentrated in the folks that are already applying AI into their own vulnerability management programs. Yep. Like, so clearly the old approach of, all right, let's give everyone 14 days to patch everything, that
window suddenly looks very long in a new world where they're being weaponized right away.
But most organizations aren't there yet, right? So you kind of got two competing in the world of bounty programs. Don't go incentivize people to do that if you aren't already there, right? Like it should really be you're learning something from every bug bounty report. But you've got to be thinking about what does the new best in class look like, and how do we continually push that down? And that's the type of push you're seeing some of the best security teams drive is, all right, let's just acknowledge that its adversaries are going to be getting better, and then really partner with our internal teams on how can AI help us get patches out there faster.
Yeah, and I think, Andrew from Sublime Security and I were talking the other day about this. And, there's the whole, like, you need to get out and patch faster. But then we see all the stuff like with NPM where it is sort of just laughable in the sense that, like, oh, yeah, I don't know how we're going to necessarily deal with this other than like patch fast, but not too fast. Give it a day or something, kind of hope for the best, because at the end of the day, maintainers are unpaid and they're delivering all this critical software. And when there's supply chain compromises, it's not something that's going to show up as a vulnerability necessarily, not at least, until someone detects it. How should people be thinking about this? Like, how do security teams need to adapt in this world where people are realizing it's kind of easy to phish anyone and take over a maintainer account and, put some obfuscated whatever in there?
Yeah, I'll actually, I'll have to be on a soapbox here for a second on this one, because there's very reasonable opinions on either side of this. But I think patch as fast as you can, and do not let the excuse of that bias you towards slowing down the patch cadence because whatever reason. Make sure you're measuring the appropriate things. Make sure you're accounting for stability and acceptance criteria and the actual usability side of patch management. And as soon as it's not going to cause some type of major regression to apply it, you should be applying it. And then you asked, there's a very real question there. It will be like, all right, well, doesn't that make me vulnerable? And if I had just been sitting around and not patching things, you've got to weigh those two risks against each other. And then ask yourselves, all right, so if delaying patches and getting a high degree of certainty in open source patches isn't the right approach, what is the right approach? And I think this is where we get into a different area, which is actually much harder. So I wouldn't let a harder problem get away from what is unquestionably a best practice in the majority of cases out there. And then you get into hard thing, all the way back to Ken Tomlin's early essay on the implications of trusting trust. Yeah, we have not quite solved that yet. But what does good look like there? How do you get defense in depth? How do you have blast radius? How do you limit the impact of a known dependency? How do you reduce the attack surface of dependencies in the areas? These are all things that security teams historically have not done very well because we're terrible partners to engineering organizations out there. So I think the solution to here is not to say, hey, don't patch NPM because there might be compromised dependencies. You have to assume compromise in those dependencies and be better partners. I think that's the big thing,
yep. Yeah. And so does it end up being sort of a pivot to, I mean, like all of the things you just mentioned, right, of managing blast radius and thinking through how do we make sure we actually can roll forward and roll back very easily? How would we detect, assuming something bad is going to happen? Would we know? Do we have monitoring to even be able to tell so that we can react to that? Yeah, it seems like that there's definitely going to have to be sort of a change in mindset when it comes to what priorities are on the defender side, because to your point, we can't just not be patching things. I mean, maybe it makes sense to wait for a day. I don't know. I guess it sort of depends on each individual's risk profile and where they're at. Because probably these things seem to be turned, like when they're released, somebody catches it within a day. And if you're, part of the unlucky few that were initial adopters, then you end up getting hit.
Yeah, I think the meta point I'm trying to make there is don't let security be the reason for that delay. You're already going to have enough delay for acceptance criteria testing and quality and change management and all the other reasons that patches get delayed. There's no reason for security to add an additional delay to that mechanism.
Yeah, and when it comes to, like, if you're the buyer, right, like you're an enterprise, you're buying from all these SaaS vendors, I mean, how should they be thinking about updating third-party risk management for this world? Because it used to be where you'd have like log4j, and then I get like 400 emails from every one of my customers saying like, do you know about this? Have you done something about it? And we're like in the middle of everyone in the entire company trying to patch things. But in a world where exploits are being delivered so quickly, how should buyers be thinking about this when it comes to all the different SaaS providers they have?
Yeah, similar to the kind of just having about how do you trust? It's in the areas where you need a high degree of assurance that there won't be any compromise here. You're not going to be able to get that from any type of third-party orientation. You just won't. You can't trust it to the level you would expect to, and so that means aligning with the business on what is the right level of assurance needed for this application. If we go and then generally assume that there's going to be a whole bunch of places where the right business decision is to trust a bunch of third parties that we can't really trust, I like to zoom into what are the aspects that we can trust there.
Yep.
And the best signal I think we have in those scenarios is what their responses look like to historic incidents, which I think is the only silver lining in this. Is I think we can expect the rate of incidents to go up. That's bad for a whole lot of reasons, but it's good for the reason that your ability to demand transparency and evaluate people based on the efficacy of their prior responses is, I think, one of the best signals that we'd be tapping into, and one of the most underutilized signals out there is demand a high degree of transparency and a high bar for how quickly are they detecting and responding to things that affect their customers.
Yeah, no, I think that's super important. I mean, if we look at the SalesLoft breach that happened recently, I mean, I think their breach notification page was set to like not be indexed by crawlers and a bunch of stuff. I think there was another one I saw recently where they posted and then took it down. And I think you're spot on, though. It's not necessarily that being breached is bad, because every company has some level of breaches at some point. Something happens. And really what's important is can I trust that you are going to be very on top of it? You're going to let me know exactly what my risk is instead of trying to hand wave around it and say, we have no indication that X happened when, to me that reads as, oh, you didn't have logs. Great. That's awesome.
You're hitting it exactly. So let's take that example and throw SalesLoft under the bus a little bit for this one. It's like, it's unfair to look at them and say, how could you have this vulnerability? How could you get compromised? Of course that was going to happen, but it is fair to look at them and say, how could you not have known this was going to happen? And why were you not prepared for this to happen? And I think it's pretty clear in the SalesLoft case that the security teams everywhere that are depending on them for clear, timely answers are not getting what they need. And so you can both retroactively evaluate them against that. It's like, what do we think of the maturity of their process around their ability to recover from an incident like this and assist me as I'm trying to recover from the cascading implications of this? It's fair to ask that. And then it's fair to look forward and say, all right, what are the things we could look for a net new vendor that we've never worked with before that would give us assurance that when something does go wrong, they're going to be a partner that we can rely on to help us investigate and recover.
And how can we change that mindset, right? Because I think there's still within businesses, outside of security teams, maybe to some extent within security teams, but often in businesses, they're just like, we need to minimize this. Don't make this into anything. Like, send the notice out Friday, 7 p.m. Just say we have no indication of anything that really happened and kind of hope for the best. How do we kind of shift that mindset so that people understand that it's all about transparency? We understand things are going to happen. Is it that way because people have jumped on folks in the past when there's been a breach and just kind of run them over when mistakes were made that, can happen? Or is it just kind of the general human nature of like not wanting to get caught doing something? I mean, is there something we can do, or is this a problem we created of our own accord?
This begins and ends with incentives. And I think too often in the security community, we tend to focus on what you should do, the ethics and the morality of it, which that's important. Don't get me wrong. But ethics take a back seat to incentives constantly across all aspects of human nature. If you want consistent behavior, it's about aligning incentives, not about aligning ethics in an organization.
And this is why you got into bug bounties. And that's why I've always loved bounty programs, because the incentives were always really, really well aligned versus pen testers who are trying to bill out tons of hours. You're giving them a fixed amount of money, regardless of if they find anything or not. I've always loved bounties for the fact that it's like, I will pay you for exploitable vulnerabilities in the platform. And it's very clear.
I appreciate that tie-in. Incentives is also what I love about bug bounties. But in the world of third-party supply chain, one of the things we're running into is we're not in control of all the incentives as a security organization. So focus on aligning as many of them as you can. But if I could wave one magic wand to fix this problem, it would be aligning the litigious incentives in corporate America around here. Alex Stamos has a pretty good, about to call it an argument, it's more of a rant, but it is a really, really good, really entertaining rant on this, which is look at the industries that have done this well, that we kind of respect for this now, and acknowledge that it's never easy across any of them. Yep. But places like the automotive and the airline industries, what they got right from this is the incentives to not be transparent and not tell a broad group of people as soon as possible to take accountability for it are bigger than the incentives to do it. And so part of that is the regulators showing up and say, hey, this is going to be painful. We're going to be fining you. You're going to have to do these. You're going to have to submit to independent third-party audits and accident investigations and all this terrible stuff. But your maximum downside for civil liability is going to be greatly reduced if you follow all of these areas and do all of these things. And the output of that is a lot of pain. let's not put it as an easy thing, but you're not left wondering, why did this happen and what can we learn from it and how do we make sure it never happens again? And that's the thing we have to get right as we increasingly depend upon each other, is those feedback loops across all those organizations. And if we could just stop suing each other or put some caps on how much you could sue each other for these things, if you're transparent and if you commit to learning from your mistakes, I think we'd go a long way.
Yeah, and I think that's one where I think every CISO in existence is in agreement with. Like, we would love more regulation on what we need to do. Otherwise, the incentives just aren't there. The cost of being breached to a business, if you're thinking about cybersecurity risk as a risk among many other risks that the CFO and CEO need to balance, the risk of a breach in most cases is kind of lower than how much it would cost to really put together a solid program. And the only way to really put some teeth behind that is actually have the costs of the breach not be borne by everyone who's affected, all the people who now need to call and get credit monitoring or whatever, and have some regulatory fines. Because otherwise, I mean, if you're a sensible business person, you're just going to look at this as, okay, well, here's the likelihood, here's the potential cost. And, you have all these other risks, including not delivering product in time or whatever it might be. And I mean, I think to the point on incentives, if those incentives aren't aligned, then we're just kind of stuck and people are going to be not doing the quote unquote right thing. Is it, I mean, when it comes to, the regulatory bits, compliance, because there really hasn't been a whole lot when it comes, like we have the SEC, being able to, you have to notify people if there's any sort of material incident that could be causing investors pain. But beyond that, there's not really anything else. Do you see something being feasible in the near term or no?
I'm way outside of my hair down there, but I think it starts from mimicking the approaches that have worked in other critical infrastructure areas. And it's not just about the fines or the limitations on liability. It's about the trade-off from that. And in all those areas, it is some type of regulatory body who really takes safety on as the primary goal. And they all arrive at the same conclusion, which is when something bad has happened historically, we need really authoritative details on exactly what went wrong so that everybody involved can learn from that. And then we can hold people liable for not learning from the mistakes of others. And
I think that's such a good point, right? Because we know things are going to happen. You don't want to punish people for things that happen, but not learning from mistakes is sort of the inexcusable bit. When we know that this was something that should have been done and you just kind of miffed it off.
But let's just take the analogy. I'm sitting in a security role now. What can we learn from the SalesLoft incident? Not anywhere near as enough as we should be able to learn, because we are never going to see a true incident post-mortem of exactly what went wrong, exactly what the attackers
almost certainly
did.
Somewhat embarrassing if that gets out. I mean, well, it's easy to pick apart, right? It's like you didn't have monitoring on this and this, you didn't realize this, and it's like, well, great, hindsight is amazing. I mean, I'm sure they should have had plenty of things and, not to get a total pass, but this could happen to basically any other SaaS company that has OAuth tokens sitting around. I mean, I'm sure most companies are not sitting and monitoring them and access to them and their usage and all of the things that you'd probably want someone to have. I'm sure there's way too many admins with access in many cases, and all of the things that people working in security have seen over and over again.
Yeah, no, just imagine if that's the approach we took to airline safety or anything else that we depend on. Wow, this stuff's really hard and it's going to be embarrassing to you. So let's make sure nobody learns from it. It's we got to attack the incentives. It's there's no other way around it.
Well, I hope at some point we'll get our heads on right and be able to deal with that. I feel like that's not anywhere in the near-term future, short of a major disaster that causes some sort of terrible havoc. Worse than the pipeline shutting down the eastern seaboard for a week. I don't think that was enough.
Yeah.
It needs to be something truly drastic.
We haven't had a cyber Pearl Harbor yet. I keep it keeps feeling like
cyber Pearl Harbor. It's got a nice ring to it. That's I'm sure that'll be someone calling a bad cyber attack. It'll be like a state-sponsored thing that really does serious economic damage. And that's when, we'll kind of respond to, okay, we need to actually get some rules in place here.
I definitely didn't invent that term. I don't know who to credit for that, but there we go.
And so when it comes to, again, things that people you see focus on, because you see lots of different customers and companies and their security programs and how they're managing not only vulnerabilities, but I assume you kind of have some insight into the rest of what's going on there. What are things you see companies focusing on where, you're seeing this and like, that's a thing you could do, versus things where you're like, I can't believe they're not doing X. This is just, we know this is a problem. This is an easy slam dunk. Why aren't you doing it? What are the kind of two things that you see most often on either side of that scale?
I'm actually going to go back to your first question, because I do think we should all be talking about AI right now. Not from like it's going to solve all of our problems, but one pattern I'm starting to see across a bunch of people that are rolling out AI right now, because there's a whole bunch of areas where it's going well and a bunch of areas where it's not going well. And I'll say the area where we see it going really poorly is when people fall into the hype and think AI has reached super intelligence and it can completely replace some entire function in an organization. I'm actually not very bullish on that point. I think there's a good chance that it happens, but we're a long way off from that. So we shouldn't be planning our immediate term roadmap with that in mind. I have a perspective that it's coming, but where it's really adding value and where it's really working today is where people break down all the toil that goes on in an individual role today. And instead of trying to map AI to a one-to-one human persona, looking at the very specific things that exist inside your critical security bottlenecks and applying it for that. Things as simple as, all right, let's never have a analyst do CVSS on a report again.
Yep.
Like that doesn't solve vulnerability management, but
it frees up a lot of time.
That's exactly right. And when you start looking across your security posture, you don't think about, okay, what humans can I replace with AI, but what are the specific areas in my system where there are clear inputs and outputs that I want to happen consistently and regularly, and I can build good evaluation frameworks for it. There's tons of those. And the security leaders that are thinking about it that way and approaching this as like evaluation forward AI first systems design are seeing real impact. And so I'd encourage everyone to start with that. Like, don't start from the big fancy cases, but start from the most mundane toil within your program and start chipping away at it. And it's you'll be impressed with how quickly your teams learn and make progress out of that.
Yeah, and I think it's the toil stuff ends up being kind of an easy target, right? Because a lot of times the reason it exists is it was hard to automate because it had enough ambiguity. But that's somewhat the exact things that if you hold them correctly, LLMs can do really well and you can use to automate. And I like that you called out having good eval frameworks there, because I think that's hugely important, right? Is being able to have some deterministic way to say this change or that change is actually improving, our output. So having a bunch of vulns that how you would score them, if we use CVSS as an example, and then being able to evaluate that. So now your teams actually have some sort of rubric that they're scoring against, and thinking like it changes how your teams think about the problems, because now they're building evals, and then you can automate against that and sort of have that improve, instead of, like you said, trying to think of what jobs can we replace or what people can be replaced.
Yeah, even when you get into that, this is the most surprising things that you find is you realize how many roles there are in security that we think are well understood, that we have a process behind. When you start piecing it apart, you realize how much of it is just non-deterministic, and a big part of the friction is that we didn't have a clear system behind it. When you start applying AI agents to it and building evals for it, it forces you to get to that level of systems thinking where you account for all the different changes that are out there. And even if you don't end up deploying any AI agents, you get an incredible amount of clarity by going through that systems thinking at a level that feels a little bit like toil to start with in and of itself. But there's a ton of value to unlock in just rethinking everything that we're doing now and working backwards.
Yeah, that's, I think that's one thing, because it's super easy to go and sort of wing it and just like, oh, we'll build something. And there's value into that, right? Just getting a quick win of having something work that more or less solves a problem. But the value of doing the systems thinking and breaking down the process and breaking down what are the problems that make up this process, and how do we judge what works well and what doesn't here. I mean, it really does change how you think about problems and how you think about the work that needs to be done. I mean, maybe some of it doesn't need to be done. You're like, why are we doing this? Steps that could be entirely just ripped out.
Holy cow, this is a lot more complicated, a lot harder than I thought. Why is a new college graduate in the tier 1 of my SOC doing this work? Yeah. Like, this needs to escalate immediately right here. That type of stuff we've just been glossing over in the past, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it's and I mean, I think for most people, right, it's really fun, especially for me, not the world's greatest developer, but man, I can just wreak havoc now building things that I'm sure the rest of my team is like, oh, here he goes again. I see like 3 PRs in the morning and they're just like, I'm sure they're just shaking their head. But it's cool because you can now like tackle all sorts of different things, and it, for me even, it forces me to get better because I need to make sure I'm thinking through all of the steps in a way where I maybe have given it a cursory like, oh, we'll just fix this and do that, and now I'm forced to kind of break this down in a way I wouldn't have had to before. Do you guys have anything new coming out on the HackerOne side when it comes to automation, making people's lives easier, when it comes to dealing with vulnerabilities? I mean, especially with, again, the changing pace, I can only assume you have some hidden new things that have not come out yet, which you may or may not be able to talk about. But where do you see things going, and how do you see HackerOne kind of making life easier, making us more secure.
Oh, hey, thank you. I will gladly talk about myself. This is fantastic. There's two things that we're seeing happening right there. If we just zoom into the world of security research and bug bounty for a second, we're seeing kind of two parallel trends at the same time. On one hand, you're seeing quite a bit more volume from people using AI in ways that they shouldn't. Of AI sort of like just easily getting confused. And a huge spectrum of folks that are just emboldened by, look, the AI says this is a critical problem, and it's not a critical
poor
problem.
triagers that are stuck dealing with this, I can only imagine.
But at the same time, we're seeing a volume pickup from really capable researchers finding vulnerabilities at a pace that is equally problematic for the team. And it's the second part of that is where more of my focus is going right now. Because on the noise side, filtering noise has always been a problem in the security industry. And like the AI models are actually getting much better at that, much faster.
Yep. Because you can actually validate and see like, hey, this is garbage and toss it.
That's right. Like building the validators in it is an area we're investing in, but I think is more likely to become a solved problem right away. What's not there is the biggest bottleneck in bug bounty today is on the remediation side. Most people don't run bug bounty programs, not because they don't find really exploitable problems for you, but because everyone's got a backlog of security findings that they already know about. And that problem is getting a lot worse across the board for everybody here. And so the question is, what are we going to do about that? How do we do that?
I hear something about automated remediation coming.
A little bit, but not just even automated remediation. That's a very core part of it that needs to happen, but even automating the triage and validation of the particular findings and thinking about remediation more broadly than just
fixing this one bug.
Fixing this one bug and go apply this one piece to it. Like, what are the system changes that we have on our backlog that need to get prioritized? How do we start leaning into those? And how do we get AI helping out with some of those as well, which is actually one of the areas that AI is much better at than historically we've had. Is like, all right, we know the systemic fix to this type of SSRF or this type of input validation or this type of memory safety issue is this type of system-wide refactoring. One of the areas that like you should be taking those insights and those learning loops back to your engineering teams to get them prioritized, because the answer 2 years ago might have been, we know that would solve SQL injection, but we're never going to be able to go retrofit that old code base for that. We're seeing a lot more of those projects get through and get done. Yep. In some cases, just as a proof of concept for, hey, could AI go do this? But it's got real security impact. So we're viewing our role increasingly about how do you help people extract insight, deal with this significant increase in overall vulnerability submissions, and then extract trends from it and apply the right system level mitigations for it broadly than just individual patch management.
That's great. I think that's definitely one of the shortcomings. I think people end up seeing vulnerability A and B and C, and then they go patch those, but then A2 comes up and C2 comes up, and it kind of carries on and on. And to your point, it always is kind of those older services and systems where you're like, it's on end of life Angular. We're never going to get to that. And being able to have automations that can help, even if it doesn't do it fully, that can help make that project a much easier lift. I mean, I think that has the potential for huge impact. Well, thanks a ton for jumping on. It's great to chat. But thanks for joining. It was really great to have you. Hopefully we'll do this again. And otherwise, have a great day. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks a lot, Nate. Have a good one.
Thanks for listening to the TPRM podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to subscribe and share it with a colleague. You can find more insights and resources over at tprmpodcast.com. And until next time, remember, trust nothing, verify most things, and keep building. That's it for this episode of the TPRM Podcast. I'm Nate Lee. Thanks for joining me and my guest today. If you found this conversation valuable, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app, leave us a review, and share the episode with your peers and colleagues. For more resources and insights on building business-aligned security programs and managing vendor security, visit tprmpodcast.com and connect with me on LinkedIn. We'll see you next time.